Daniel drove confidently along the highway from Tijuana to Mexico City. As it is easy to say, from Tijuana to Mexico City, or to be more precise and scrupulous, Daniel and his companion, Leila Blake, had a journey of more than 2,000 kilometers. Leila woke up and opened her eyes, then yawned sweetly and at the same time stretched out as far as the space between the back of the seat and the panel in front allowed. "How long is it to Querétaro?" Daniel smiled. He was glad that his partner had had a good night's sleep. The path was still the same. There were a minimum of gas stations throughout. There was no talk of decent motels at all. Besides, the terrible July heat. Daniel looked at the guidebook, unfolded and lying on his lap under the steering wheel. If I'm not mistaken, then we are speeding along Highway 15D, and that means now. He drove around a rusty tin canister thrown right on the highway. The turn sent the guidebook flying off his lap. "Well, your mother?" Leila smiled and leaned down, picked up the guidebook and began to study it herself, running a beautiful finger along the lines and paths on a piece of paper with a cheerful inscription. "The way from the USA to Mexico." Querétaro is just over 40 kilometers or 25 miles away. She looked at the cover of the guidebook. "Where did you buy it?" "Funny. It looks like a booklet from a children's store." Daniel laughed. "I didn't buy it. It was kept in my house as part of an inheritance from my dad. He was a dreamer and a traveler. Well, I told you." Leila looked at her partner and smiled sadly. Daniel realized that he had said something unnecessary. They are two detectives, best friends and partners. Daniel Rivera and Leila Blake went to Mexico City for a reason. The fact is that Leila's uncle, Mongo Blake, was admitted to the hospital in a very serious condition. The doctors convinced Leila that the most severe crisis has passed. The old man is receiving adequate help, but if possible, he needs the care of loved ones. Leila is an eternal altruist, honest and kind. She just couldn't do it any other way, and here she and her partner are racing in a rented car along a deserted highway. Further, closer to Querétaro, side roads will join the main highway, merge into it, and the flow of cars will increase. But right now, their two-seater sports Mercedes was the only car on the road. Daniel yawned. "Listen, isn't there a gas station ahead?" Leila looked through the glass in the direction Daniel was pointing. "Yes, it looks like it. What's going on there?" Daniel squinted, trying to make out what was happening at the gas station, and said in surprise with a barely noticeable gloomy tone, "I don't know. Something is strange." Indeed, there was some kind of incomprehensible fuss near the gas station. Two young men, one in a plaid shirt and a red bandana, and the other in a black t-shirt and blue jeans, were carrying a large metal box to a battered pickup truck. Everything was led by a fat, middle-aged man stripped to the waist, besides armed with a pump-action shotgun. "Holy shit, they're robbing a gas station." Daniel made a familiar movement with his hand, reaching for the panel, to the place where the walkie-talkie should be located. But, burying his palm in the plastic, he remembered that he was not in his usual official car. "Damn it! Leila, baby, do you have a gun?" The girl shook her small revolver out of her purse onto her lap, expertly checked the drum. "But what about it? Armed and dangerous?" Daniel gave a jaunty hack and grinned. "We block the pickup truck with our car and tie everyone there side by side. Danny, they seem to be armed." In confirmation of her words, the big man with the pump pointed his weapon at the approaching Mercedes. Apparently, he told his accomplices to hurry up, and two guys quickly threw a metal box into the back and then jumped into the car. The man with the gun was in no hurry. He impressively walked up to the pickup and got behind the wheel. Then he stuck his hand out the window and showed his middle finger. The gesture was clearly intended for Daniel and Leila. Suddenly, Leila screamed. Those bastards! Daniel almost choked and looked at the girl in surprise. His partner, so beautiful, one might even say gentle and affectionate in appearance, and suddenly an expletive. It even seemed to the man that she had changed her tone to a lower one. It turned out to be very brutal, but for a woman, of course. And suddenly, she's back. They're going to leave. Daniel turned on the gas. They won't leave. Back me up in case any of these pieces decide to shoot. Leila climbed out of the window almost to her waist and began to aim her revolver. Daniel glanced briefly at his partner, but his gaze lingered. Oh, and my mulatto partner has an ass. Oh, and why are we only friends with her? The whole department in New York is whispering that we're a couple. But alas, alas, alas. Don't fall out, baby. We're going to get them now. The Mercedes was quickly catching up with the pickup truck. That's another 100 meters. Daniel saw that the guys were shouting something to the driver, the same half-naked fat man. He waved them away, shouted back, but did not speed up. It even seemed as if he had released the gas and the car was going by inertia. Baby, keep your sights on them. If they try to kick back, shoot immediately. Leila might not have heard him. The Mercedes was racing at high speed. The wind was deafening the girl, but with her police instinct, she understood everything and knew what to do. But, contrary to what was expected, the incredible happened. The intruder's pickup truck was covered with a silvery glow, electric discharges, and simply disappeared from the highway. It was as if he wasn't even on her. It was as if he had become invisible, dissolved, disappeared his mother. Daniel abruptly turned aside and pulled over to the side of the road. It was good that Leila managed to react and squeeze it into the cabin a moment before the sudden break-in and grab at the handle. But it shook a lot. Daniel himself almost flew face first into the panel. Did you see it? No, motherfucker, did you see it? He just disappeared. Leila shook her head. I saw it, but how is that? After all, this can't be happening. I don't know myself. Daniel got out of the car and stared dumbfounded at the highway, at the very place where the pickup truck with the criminals had disappeared. If someone had told me about it, I would never have believed it. Complete nonsense. Leila also got out of the car and walked towards the highway. Daniel got scared and ran after her. No, don't you dare go there. He took her hand. Leila, let's deal with this later. Let's go back to the gas station now. Most likely someone needs help there. Leila stared at the highway in fascination, then shook her head and said in a detached way, as if her consciousness was hovering somewhere in the distance. Yes, okay. 10 minutes later, they parked their Mercedes at the gas station. They walked the whole way in silence. Daniel and Leila tried to analyze and comprehend what had happened. Everything they saw smacked of sheer devilry. Daniel repeated to himself for the 10th time. It can't be. This can't be happening. Damn me, damn me. Leila was more serious. She believed that the world around her was much more mysterious and interesting. She firmly learned for herself that everything around obeys not only the known laws of physics, but that there are also unknown, undiscovered laws. And what they saw on the highway could well be one of the unexplored phenomena. The gas station occupied an area in the middle of which, without any fencing and an access lane, 2 columns were installed. One look at which said, with my own eyes, "Flammable. Damn flammable." Behind the speakers stood a rickety clapboard house that looked more like a barn. On the sign it was written, "Shop. The best products in El Paso." Daniel took his Desert Eagle out of his chest holster, which he placed directly on his naked body under his shirt. This surprised Leila not a little. "Well, how is it on such a trip without weapons?" She pointed her revolver at the door. "Be careful, Danny. Now I understand what you were talking about with border control." He nodded and pushed the door forward, hiding behind the wall. But there was no one to hide from. The room was in complete disarray. The counter was overturned, the cash register was lying on the floor, small coins were scattered around, water was gurgling somewhere. There were also broken bottles of booze on the floor. Yeah, these scoundrels got used to it before. Daniel Rivera, a detective with the New York Police Department, couldn't find the right word. It was extremely rare. Leila came to the rescue. "Disappear? That's right, baby, before you disappear. And where is the owner? Did he disappear too?" A hoarse voice came from behind the broken counter. "Help! Hey, help!" The injured man spoke with a Mexican accent. Leila slowly walked around the counter to the right, and Daniel carefully leaned over it. "He's hurt. There's a first aid kit in the car." Daniel ran outside and Leila crouched closer to the wounded man. "Sir, who did this? Do you know them? We're from the NYPD, USA. Can you hear me, sir?" The man cleared his throat but couldn't say anything else. A thin trickle of blood trickled down his cheek from his mouth, and his eyes quickly turned cloudy. Leila lifted her palm, first felt, and then saw the blood on her dark skin. Oh my God! Leila was not a coward, that is, to be more precise. She was not an alarmist. She was a police officer, an American police detective of African descent originally from Harlem, and she saw all sorts of things. But such sights always left an indelible mark on her memories. Detective Leila Blake overcame herself, took the injured man's hand and tried to feel for a pulse. A minute later, Daniel flew into the store. "How is he?" "I found bandages and some medicines here." He understood everything correctly from Leila's doomed look. "Listen, Leia." He came over and put his arm around her shoulders, helped her up. "Never mind, huh? Haven't we been through enough together? Because..." Leila smiled sadly. "Okay, stop it, Mommy Danny. I'm fine. What'll we do? They laid him out of that pump in the hands of a half-naked fat guy. You saw him. The experts are here." Daniel looked around. "Such a rout. You know, we have to inform the local municipality of the police. In fact, and not in fact, this is their territory, but the case smacks of sheer devilry, don't you think?" Leila nodded. "Maybe first we'll contact Chief Peters. We'll report everything in form, and then we will act according to the circumstances. I think we'll contact the chief first, and then notify the local municipality. There should be a phone here." Daniel looked around and saw a phone on a small stand table near the broken bar. A tall bar stool with a shabby plush seat was lying nearby. There was a feeling that the bar was being smashed with this particular chair. Leila leaned against the counter, and Daniel went to the phone. He was not surprised by the fact that the handset had been removed from the machine. He picked it up and listened. The phone was working. But just as he was about to dial the number of the New York Main Police switchboard, the brakes of a car screeched outside. He heard staccato commands in Spanish and the click of pistol bolts. Leila grinned. "Speak of the lungs. Danny, be careful. Don't forget, we're in Mexico." Daniel nodded, and at that moment, 3 policemen, the Municipal Police of Mexico, burst into the room. It was clear from their unshaven faces, off-the-shoulder hats, and filthy uniforms that they were most likely from a nearby rundown village, possibly where the murdered gas station owner also lived. "Stop! Don't move! Weapons on the floor!" They pointed their guns at Daniel and Leila. Leila put the revolver on the counter, obediently raised her hands, and turned sideways to the counter. Daniel, in turn, did not so quickly throw away the gun, then raised his hands and decided to clarify the situation immediately. "Officers, we are from the USA, the police department." "Shut up, asshole." Daniel felt the overwhelming smell of garlic and alcohol from the lipped mouth of the Mexican cop who jumped up to him first. Then a sharp punch in the stomach. The guy was clearly aiming at the bladder area. A well-honed punch, only he had no idea that Detective Daniel Rivera, a karate champion, had a literally titanium plate of inflated abs instead of a belly. However, the guy did not stop there. He tried to turn Daniel around sharply, and he would have barely succeeded if the detective himself had not turned to the wall with a condescending smile. "That's how you stand, you fucking gringo." The policeman brazenly felt Daniel's pockets, then his chest, and found a holster. "And what is this? Do you have any more weapons?" Daniel decided to stop this lawlessness. "We're on the same side, guys. We are police officers. Me and her. My badge is in the car. We're not on duty." "Shut up." This was already shouted by another officer, apparently the senior one. He watched everything and gave orders, but apparently decided to take the initiative himself. "So, who are you? Chocolate bar?" He approached Leila from behind, and of course, the search began with her hips, in particular in the buttocks area, covered with cotton-light jeans. But, to his regret and surprise at the same time, he groped and fished out her personal badge from the side pocket of the girl's jeans. "An officer? Are you a police officer?" Daniel said ironically from the wall. "It hasn't been 6 months since everything fell into place." The policeman, holding him down and poking him in the back with a pistol, turned to his senior officer in disbelief. "Chief, are they cops?" The officer was in no hurry to let go of the young mulatto Leila Blake, continuing to hold an impudent paw on her buttock, but she turned around herself and snatched her badge from his hands. Despite her wild desire to punch the arrogant Mexican in the stubbly face, she smiled. "I'm very glad that everything is cleared up. By the way, that giant at the wall is also a cop." Daniel turned around and almost knocked over a policeman standing behind him with his shoulder, and immediately pointed to his holster and pistol lying on the floor among broken glass and spilled drinks into a single puddle. "By the way, officer, you dropped my holster." The detective's icy gaze somewhat stunned the previously confident Mexican. He bent down, picked up the holster, and casually handed it to Daniel. "Well done, nice boy. I never hit detainees again. You're not a cowboy from the time of General Lee." The senior officer moved away from Leila and looked around. He felt a more adequate person in Leila than in the huge gringo giant standing against the wall, but obeying the unwritten rules of male solidarity and the code of Mexican macho, he turned to him. "How did you get here, detectives? And what the fuck happened here, holy Brigitte? Save my soul for your foot?" Daniel looked at Leila, and their eyes met. "We don't know any more than you do. We were driving along the highway towards Gueretaro and then on to Mexico City. We wanted to refuel and found a uniform bedlam here. By the way, there's a dead owner behind the counter." The third policeman, lanky and thin, who had been silent until now, leaned over the counter. "This is Ernesto, Chief. He's from our village. I've known him since childhood. Apparently, he was able to reach the police station injured and then crawled here and died." The boss did not look behind the counter. He stared at Daniel and then turned to the lanky one. "Well, who did you expect to see here? St. Columbus? And what are you standing for? Go to the car, report that Ernesto Guerra is at the gas station. In short, report that a crime, murder, and—" He looked around. "Robbery took place here." The lanky man went outside, followed by a second policeman who smelled fiercely of garlic. As he walked, he looked at Leila and smacked his lips. The girl barely whispered, "The freak." The senior Mexican officer looked at her, but pretended not to hear. Grinned. "What is the purpose of traveling in Mexico? Do you have a special assignment?" Leila took the floor. "We're going to Mexico City. My relative is seriously ill. This is a private trip and Detective Rivera is accompanying me." "Are you Mexican?" "No, I was born in the USA." The Mexican policeman was thinking about something. I thought about what to ask and finally said it. "And you travel in such a car?" "It's a sports Mercedes, also with a convertible top." Daniel stepped away from the wall. "Yes, and I note that the car was rented for cash in Texas." The officer looked into Detective Rivera's eyes. "Oh, and he didn't like this white-skinned, tall, and self-confident, and fashionably dressed coxcomb. It's even a bit of a pity that he turned out to be a detective." The Mexican cleared his throat throatily and said, "Leave the crime scene. That's where you're cops abroad, and here you're just ordinary gringos on my territory. I can only pretend that I haven't seen you here." When he finished, the Mexican spat at his feet. Daniel was grinning and was about to say something in his own way, but Leila took his hand and led him to the exit, nodding to the Mexican as she went. "Thank you very much, officer." Daniel got behind the wheel. Leila sat next to him and took a deep breath. The situation only seemed more or less ordinary from the outside, but the girl experienced real stress, especially when she felt the Mexican's palms on her hips. Daniel felt that there was something wrong with his partner. "How are you, baby?" Leila took a deep breath. "Yes, apparently they've never heard of harassment here. It's just, when he started searching me, I remembered the time when I was taken hostage by a psychopath from the slaughterhouse. Do you understand?" Daniel put his arm around her shoulder, at the same time starting the car with his other hand. "Yes, it was a big deal. I almost turned gray then. The main thing is over, but don't pay attention to these hamadryads, okay?" Leila was silent and trembling softly, ready to cry, but professional instinct got the better of her worries. "I understand. We will stay in this area for a couple of days." Daniel smiled. We need to get to civilization. Querétaro is just around the corner. We'll get there in half an hour. We'll rent a room in some hotel. I'm sure you have some expert from homegrown ufologists, psychics, magicians, or sorcerers on your belt to explain what we saw." Leila was smiling. Yes, there was such a person in her memory. Besides, she knew his phone number. Whistlin' Marfuz, an interesting and strange professor of quantum physics who was interested in the theory of paranormal phenomena and is literally obsessed with studying the possibility of a quantum leap. For such a theory, an attempt to substantiate it, and the construction of a layout that did not work at the right time, the professor was deprived of the chair, but at the same time he was not discouraged. He was always interesting, cheerful, and fresh. Besides, he was not Leila Blake's closest friend, but he was always willing to help. Just an hour earlier, 50-year-old Diego had jumped into the front seat of his pickup truck. Laughing, he threw the pump-action shotgun into the passenger seat, turned to his accomplices, made a predatory, mocking face, quickly moving his tongue like a snake, and then stuck his hand out the window and showed his middle finger. "Hurry up, Diego! What the fuck are you doing?" The Mexican leader, naked to the waist, turned around as he drove onto the highway. "Shut up, snake! They can't keep up with us. Does this girl have a revolver?" The bandit, nicknamed the Snake, and his accomplice and younger brother Javier turned around. "That's right. Hurry up. They're definitely cops. I can smell them a mile away," Diego shouted again. "Stop howling. The passage is valid for only 5 seconds. You need to calculate the time or we will crash against a closed wall. 10, 9, 8. 3 seconds later, he released the gas and the car drove by inertia, providing the necessary deceleration. And now, the whole body was covered with radiance. Electric discharges played in the white flame. All 3 criminals felt the organs inside the body rise to the throat. Diego screamed, "From the screw, bitches! Let's fly!" Snake and Javier were silent. They just grabbed the handles and squeezed them with frantic force. They were rushing through space as black as night, saw distant flashes of stars or whatever else it could be. Snow-white flames covered their bodies. They inhaled it, but did not burn themselves. On the contrary, they felt cold. Icy darkness penetrated them with an unbearable smell of fresh, washed clothes or air after a thunderstorm. Diego was laughing wildly, and Javier said in a whisper, "Mom." Diego Ramina came across this passage by chance, by the will of a happy or unfortunate accident. One evening, he bought a bottle of cheap tequila at the Ernesto Gary gas station, drank a good half of it in the store, bowed to the seller and walked along the highway towards Querétaro, then turned onto the dirt road to his native village. Walking along the highway, he hastily condemned the bottle, cursed, and decided to go back to the gas station for more, refuel, so to speak, but suddenly he saw white lights wandering at arm's length right in the middle of the highway. Diego belched and bulged his eyes, backing away. What the fuck is this? The climate seems to be too dry for the fires of St. Elma. Suddenly, the lights and flashes stopped. Diego stood up and shook his balding head, scratching his stubble. The desire to buy an additional portion of alcohol has receded. The Mexican himself took a step, another, and another. And suddenly he realized that he was flying in pitch darkness, covered with a white glow. A few moments later, he felt the firmness of the paved highway under his feet again. The sun was burning at the zenith. What the hell happened to me? He crossed himself and kissed his thumb in his fist. It was evening, wasn't it? Is it dark? Where am I? He blinked against the sun and looked around. A signpost loomed in the distance. Diego went to him, trying to walk along the side of the road without entering the highway. He was afraid that he would be thrown God knows where again. But Diego remembered the place of his landing, as he said to himself. He picked up a dry branch from the ground and stuck it at the curb. The situation seemed curious, but the most surprising thing was that it did not frighten a Mexican named Diego, a 50-year-old criminal, a drunkard, and a local gangster. The sign on the sign made it clear that he had been thrown away from Ernesto's gas station 100 miles north to the vicinity of Villa de Reyes. Diego whistled. However, although he was a drunkard and a criminal, he was never a fool, which is probably why he lived to his age, leading a very dangerous lifestyle. He estimated that he teleported away from Ernesto's gas station at about the beginning of the 9th evening. So there was a specific starting point. Now, the sun in the sky indicated the time no later than 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so you need to wait for the evening. Then the portal will open again and take him back. The idea that the portal could throw him anywhere did not come to mind, but another one came. Robbing an elderly Ernesto's gas station. Diego was waiting, sitting on the side of the road and rubbing his hands, grinning maliciously. After all, this old fuck Ernesto had no family or relatives. He kept a gas station and a small shoddy shop there and put all the money in a pot, in a safe right at the gas station. Javier, Diego's nephew from his late wife's side, installed this safe there, and he also blabbed about it during another binge. What if you audaciously rob an old man, and then rush through the aisle and find yourself 100 miles from the crime scene? Immediately move to Villa de Reyes and arrange a brawl there within reason. You can even get into their local jail. Diego laughed again. Then who's going to file charges for robbing Ernesto's gas station? I wasn't even there. I groped the goats in Villa de Reyes and beat their men. When evening came, Diego again saw bright flashes and lights in the air above the asphalt of the highway. This time, he entered the portal slowly, crossing himself before taking a step. But, to his surprise, he seemed to have hit a wall. I took a step back and tried again. I hit the wall again, and I managed to get in only for the 4th or 5th time. The passage worked. The place was the same. Ernesto's gas station was visible in the distance and the sun was shining at the zenith again. This means that the passage had the ability to transport people not only in space, but also in time for about 12 to 16 hours ahead. And how long will it last? We need to hurry. Leila Blake was sitting on a sagging couch and holding a phone in her lap. Daniel, tired from the journey, was finishing taking a shower, and a few minutes later appeared in the living room of a small motel room. Leila, they're having hot water outages. I advise you not to waste any time. Then we'll call your professor. Leila, upon hearing this news, hurried to the shower. Daniel sat down in her seat and picked up the TV remote control. He clicked channel after channel and was surprised to find that they were all broadcasting in Spanish. On one of the channels, he saw an episode of the familiar TV series Highway Patrol. Wow, they're playing it here too. The good old thing from the 50s. On the screen, the main character, a burly policeman, Dan Matthews, dealt with the scoundrel, pounding him with powerful jabs at a roadhouse and saying his invariable, "In the name of the law." In Spanish, this phrase seemed funny, and not as decisive as in the original voiceover. Daniel watched the episode to the end. Leila got out of the shower and looked at the TV screen. "Still can't get rid of the junk, Danny?" The detective chuckled. "Not old stuff, baby, but retro. It's a big difference. But it's an interesting series about us, about the police." Leila smiled and sat down on the sofa, picking up the phone again. "Yes, if all police officers in the United States acted like the hero of this series, then there would be more work for internal investigation departments and civilian oversight committees for police activities. He is very cool in his methods." Daniel nodded. "That's what it is. Are you going to call?" Leila started to dial the number. "Yes, please turn it down." The girl got through to the professor quickly, as if he was waiting for a call. Daniel tried to sit closer to hear the professor's answers, but Leila angrily shushed him, and the detective had to retreat from the couch. Leila tried to listen carefully, trying not to miss the slightest detail. Yes, Mr. Marfouz, the car literally disappeared. A white glow? Yes, that was exactly what the white glow was. The professor cleared his throat. He tried to hide his excitement and almost screamed with joy. Of course, to hear confirmation of your own theory from a person you can trust, from Detective Leila Blake. But he pulled himself together. You see, Miss Blake, what you saw is a typical quantum wormhole. I can't predict or track their occurrence. In fact, you are faced with a unique phenomenon. And without false modesty, I will tell you that I am the only scientist on the whole planet who knows something about this. I can only dream of seeing this with my own eyes. Miss Blake, when are you returning to the United States? Can we meet and you can tell me more about it? You will do me a great favor by doing this. Of course, Mr. Marfouz. With pleasure. We will come to your garage, that is, to your laboratory with my partner. He saw everything too. But where could the pickup have gone? The professor cleared his throat again and almost screamed. He was finding it increasingly difficult to restrain himself. Where to? Where has he gone? Oh, gods, why didn't I see it myself? That's it. I'm fine. Now, the car could have disappeared anywhere. I would not be surprised if it is now flying somewhere in Earth orbit or millions of light years from our galaxy. Similar wormhole corridors appear all over the planet in a random order. I repeat, it is impossible to predict, and where each of them leads is unknown. Are you aware, Miss Blake, that the wreckage of a World War II bomber is lying on the surface of the moon right now? No. I assure you they are there and I can prove it. There are pictures. Leila tried to be polite. The old man was a fanatic of his theory, though, but he did not tolerate neglect. Very interesting, Mr. Marfouz. And how did he get there? Did you also end up in a quantum wormhole? Leila looked at Daniel. He sat in an armchair with a surprised face and listened attentively. The professor's answer was audible even to him. Exactly, Miss Blake. A wormhole opened right in the sky. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if Reich and his scientists somehow learned how to not quite control wormholes, but sometimes open them by thickening magnetic fields. By the way, I have a question for you. Did you hear about the Philadelphia experiment when the warship disappeared? And one more important thing. Did you feel an unusual smell near the wormhole? Daniel nodded. Leila also felt an unusual smell then. Yes, Mr. Marfouz. You know, I thought I smelled fresh grass, morning dew. I don't know how to explain it. Daniel prompted in a whisper. It smelled fresh, the smell of freshness. Leila clamped down on the microphone. Thank you, Danny, and immediately turned to the professor. It smelled fresh, washed clothes. The professor burst out laughing and screamed again. I knew it! Radiation! That's how powerful radiation smells. Leila, I beg you, and I conjure you by all the saints. If you have such an opportunity, measure the background in that place and God forbid you to go into this wormhole. No one can guarantee your safety, Daniel whispered. Ask him where they come from, these wormholes. Leila repeated the question to the professor, and he immediately gave an answer. I am sure that this is a displacement of the temporal and spatial continuum caused by the polar discharge of strong, so to speak, energy. On our planet, This is possible only with the application of the energy of an atomic explosion. I assure you that similar wormholes can be found over nuclear test sites in Nevada, and certainly in other countries where tests were conducted. Perhaps, I repeat, this is only a theory. Such wormholes appear after the penetration of UFOs on our planet. I suspect that they can somehow simulate similar passages to move their ships. The professor's tone became quieter. I am also sure that many earthquakes and ozone holes develop as a result of the opening of underground and celestial wormholes that pull everything into themselves. After 15 minutes of a torrent of words and information that Professor Whistlin Marfus was showering down like a waterfall, Leila saw fit to wrap up, politely led the professor to the end of his, in fact, monologue, and said goodbye. Daniel was looking at Leila. "What do you think, Detective Blake?" The girl was rubbing her temple. Her head was starting to ache. "You know, Danny, if I hadn't seen what happened, I would never have believed it. Shall we go to the crime scene again?" Daniel looked into Leila's eyes. "No, baby. We're going to your uncle's in Mexico City. And I'll be damned if I'm going to take that highway back to the USA. We'll leave the car in Mexico City, let them send their distiller, and we'll rush back by plane. We'll have to move your uncle as well. What do you say?" Leila nodded. "Yes, I must admit, I'm very curious how this case will end and where those criminals hid. But still, we are on foreign territory and their hospitality will be enough for us." Daniel went to the kitchen and shouted from there, "Can I make you some coffee?" "As usual, with skimmed milk and no sugar?" Leila shouted back. "No, do the usual one. I think my diet is going to have to get off me a little bit today." Diego's pickup truck was washed up on a sandbank near a giant lake. Snake and Javier got out of the car, examining their arms and legs. There was no more white flame. Diego followed and blinked. "Fuck, where are we?" The snake looked around. Ahead is a giant, smooth lake, or maybe the sea. Behind, literally a dozen meters away, there's a high embankment on which tall trees stood like a wall. The bare trunks ended in fluffy and rounded deciduous crowns several tens of meters high, like tree-like dandelions. Diego stared around with wide-open eyes. "What are these trees? Where the hell are we?" Snake and Javier were standing next to each other, and suddenly Javier almost growled. "Where did you take us, you old bastard? What kind of place is this? You said we'd be thrown out 100 miles from the gas station." Diego clenched his fists and shouted back. "Did I build that fucking thing? We need to sit here and wait. In due time, the portal will open again and throw us back to our original place." The snake looked at Diego in surprise. "Since a portal. What the fuck is this?" Diego sighed. "A passage in space, you moron piece." "Ah, that's what I'd say. And what? Just waiting?" "I'm going to get back in the car now and just wait with a bottle of tequila from Ernesto's bar, whom I killed. And you two goldfinches get in the back and take care of the safe. Hey, Javier, I think you installed this thing there, so you have to open it. And don't dig around. I'm not sure exactly when the passage will open." Javier and Snake, swearing to themselves, climbed into the back, and Diego got back behind the wheel. He fished out a bottle of tequila and gaily opened it like a cowboy. Immediately, he took a big sip and grunted. "Let's hurry up, guys. Maybe something will break off for you." Snake and Javier grabbed the safe and turned its door towards them. "It's so heavy. How did we even manage to move it, buddy?" Javier laughed. "I have heard that a person is not capable of such things during his experience. Look, There should be a small crowbar and tools in the back of the cab. I'll open this jar 1 or 2 times, I promise." The snake found the tools and handed them to Javier. Well. Suddenly, a deep growl came from the forest, ending in a powerful champing. The crowns of the trees swayed. Javier and Snake broke away from the safe and straightened up, standing in the back. "Did you hear that?" "Yes. What could it be?" "The snake back it up to the cabin." "I don't know. Maybe some kind of beast. I swear, I've never seen such a forest in my life. Maybe this." But he couldn't finish. The forest on the hill began to stand on end, as if a wave had passed through it. Tall trees swayed and the entire vast hill began to rise. Diego jumped out from behind the steering wheel. "What? What's going on?" A huge monster, previously hidden, grew right out of the ground. A hillock overgrown with forest was the shell of an ancient monster. It may well be that the giant creature, which is a fantastic hybrid of a giant crab and a turtle, did not notice the pickup truck and the people. They were bugs compared to its size. The creature slowly crawled towards the lake water, crushing both the pickup truck and the men running away from it under its lower shell. It was their death. Death on an alien planet that has not yet been discovered by astronomers of the Earth's humanity. By chance, the quantum wormhole that opened in Mexico brought the criminals here, to the place of their death. It is unknown whether they were the first here. Perhaps someone got to this planet of giants before them. Perhaps they will get after them, as well as to millions of other possible worlds opened in the corridors of quantum transitions.